Well, I'm gonna introduce our guest here. His name is William H. Dickerson II. I'm gonna bring him on. This week, we're so happy that you guys have tuned in this week at the kickoff start of the Black History Month for the UK. But as we unpack Black History Month for the UK, we're going to also be talking about Black history and everything just in general, and how it's affected both sides of the all the sides, the different sides of the world here. And here is Mr. William H. Dickerson II himself. Hey, Will, what's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, Cuzzo? How are you doing? Love you,
Yeah,
man.
man, I'm good, doing real good on this nice, brisk morning. It's nice and chilly, but I'm wrapped up tight.
Yeah,
So,
we're here too.
is it? Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say it should be chilly on that side. So, I was just kind of giving you a little bit of an introduction here, and yeah, just saying thanks for everybody for tuning in this week for our Black History Month, and I want to say a special thank you to all of the artists who have contributed. Not just this week, but in the few weeks to come. And primarily for our two artists who kicked us off this week and started off our month, McKady Amoroso with her piece "Blue Beneath My Skin," and Alexis Craig Hart with her piece. What does it mean to be Black? Both powerful, powerful pieces, and just really interesting. Really like kicks off this interesting subject matter of identity.
Yeah.
So, boom, that's the intro. And we're just glad to see that people are coming on live. Hello, hello, hello. And if any of our folks that are joining us live today have any questions or want to contribute any kind of way to our talk back, please post questions in the link below. We're going to be talking and unpacking a little bit about of this subject of identity and what does that mean in relation to Black culture. All right. So, William, what are your thoughts, man? What do you? I'm talking a lot. What do you got to say?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I just wanted to say also I wanted to say thank you to the two folks, McKady and Alexis, right?
Yeah.
Pieces. I really want to just thank you for putting your hearts and your thoughts and your mind out on paper into the world for people to hear. It was really moving for me. So I never met you, but you really blessed me. So thank you for that. Yeah, what are my thoughts on identity, man? I've been I've been wrestling with this, especially listening to the two videos and just thinking about how complex racial identity is in the context of both the United States, but then understanding how how complicated it is overseas and in different parts of the world, how much it changes depending upon where you are. And so, I've been really excited about having this conversation with you because, you and I, we grew up together, and we both have in terms of the way in which the United States culture would receive us, we're both Black, and we both have really interesting stories about identity in relationship to that as well.
Yeah.
But the things that come to my mind when I think about identity and racial identity particularly, is I've been thinking about racial identity and its connection to language. So there's something about racial identity and how people expect to hear you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Unpack that a little bit more. And actually, you know what? Before we get into answering this question, I want you to kind of give the folks out there listening an introduction of what you do, just so that they can understand the perspective of where you're coming from. Because I think that what you do is so cool, man, and it speaks so much to the importance of why you are here having this conversation with us.
Okay, got you. So again, I'm William H. Dickerson II. I am the executive director of Brockton Interfaith Community, which is a faith-based community organizing group in Brockton, Massachusetts. And, essentially the work that I do is about training and developing ordinary people in community to become community leaders. And I do that through a set of trainings that, I've created. I do that the trainings are called the School of Prophetic Action. And I do that through community organizing that focuses on building political power for community and building economic power so that people have power over their own economic destiny. So, so I've been doing that for about 8.5 years, almost 9 years in January. I started in Colorado at an organization called Together Colorado.
Yeah.
Particular work, and then from Together Colorado, me and Sean, we used to work together over there at Together Colorado. From there, then I moved to Massachusetts to accept an executive director position for the nonprofit here that does similar work. I think the last thing I'll say is some of my major focuses of work right now are around anti-racism. And so like really building trainings and development around anti-racism, anti-oppression, and then also really focusing in on, in our context, we have a huge problem with racism in our police system. And so we focus a lot on police accountability, and undoing racist structures that exist inside the police department.
Cool, man. So I mean, a lot of that you would say, you deal with this type of subject matter on a daily basis, and and I think it's really interesting because one of the projects that you did and that you've started that we've been talking about is your 52 to undo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I love that because not a lot of people think about the undoing the undoing of racism and all that jazz. And like it's in this society. Now, Colby has a question here. Do you feel that it's tougher to be a Black American citizen at the moment in comparison to a Black British citizen?
Yeah. So, Colby, I can't really speak to the oppressions and the experiences of people in being Black and British. What I can say, and the other thing that I would say to this too is like oftentimes what can happen when it comes to oppression is we can sometimes do this thing called oppression Olympics, meaning that one place is tougher than another. When really, like in relationship to oppression, everything is relative to where you are. So, and who you are. I try to stay away from saying I have it worse or easier than another person. And I really like actually just go towards the ideology of here in my context, I operate from a set in the United States, I operate both from a set of privileges because I come from a higher economics status. I'm cisgendered, heterosexual male in our context, which really puts me in a privileged position. And I'm also Christian, which is oftentimes a thing that people don't think about as being a privilege in our particular context. But in our country, Christianity is like a huge privilege. And so because I operate from those three things, sometimes I have access to more than other people would that look like me. But
yeah,
go ahead, Sheath. Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, and I can speak to the other piece as well too with just being an American and identifying as an American, right? And then being overseas in London, meeting other Black folks from different cultures, from different backgrounds, but identifying primarily as British Black citizens. I would say that I think that there is an equal, it's a different kind of racism or a different kind of identity, clash that you have going on there. Like for us in America, for folks in America, we identify as, we have this harsh identification as a history of slaves being with our ancestors and stuff being slaves and just everything that has come from that, with the prison industry complex, the voter suppression, all those things that have shaped Black culture in America. Now, when I put it in the context of a Black British person, because I'm not Black and British, but my experiences with them is there's not a huge, I mean, I'll put it like this: is you see the same types of racism, and it's sad to see. You see more of like the microaggressions, a lot more microaggressions, and a lot less representation. Which we're going to talk. Which that's why I'm really happy that one of our weeks is about representation. We're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. But like you really see it come out in those kind of ways, and especially in the arts. Like going to school there, a lot of students, we would have to fight for representation in that area. And that all, funnels down to trying to make our identity known. You know what I'm saying? And so I thought that's a really great question, Colby. And it's a difficult question to ask because, neither of us could really, I fully identify with it, but from my experience, operating, from my experience operating from basically the same standpoint as William, as an American, there are a lot more similarities than there aren't, but we also have just different perspectives with coming from a background. Well, do you know what I'm trying to say, William? I know maybe you feel in the words, but yeah, do you understand what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, man. Like, and I think that, it just becomes complicated because of how oppression works. Is this Alexis that's waving at us?
Oh yeah, there's Alexis.
Thank you so much, sister, for your piece. It was wonderful. It was powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that one of the things I was getting at around identity is that racial identity is so complex in all of our different contexts that it's hard to be able to just say that somebody has it worse than another, because that's part of the way oppression is set up, at least in our country, and the ways in which I've experienced it for myself in a worldwide standpoint. Right? Is I am treated like and a lot of times as like a second-class citizen when I walk into the United States. But when I go into like certain countries, I walk in and all I have to say is I'm American, right, quote unquote, and then people are like, oh, let me give you all of these extra privileges. And so like racial identity is like this very complex thing that like at some point in time I'm like the scum of the earth, or I'm the one to be feared, or I'm the one to be ignored. And then I could walk into an entirely different context and, be like the most privileged, richest person that walked into the room, basically.
Yeah.
And people then want to be in relationship to me.
Well, what's interesting, actually, I think it's really interesting because, you actually did a lot of traveling to the Bahamas and places like that, right?
Yeah.
St. Lucia and all those kind of stuff. And and I wanted to bring up what a little piece of what I learned about from Alexis's, monologue, where she talks about, being Jamaican. And I wanted to ask what your opinion was, because you just said something about, whenever you go abroad and you say that you're American, they give you all these extra privileges. But what was your experiences as an American going to, to the Bahamas and places like that? Yeah. Being that they're also Black, did you expect to have some sort of like, oh yeah, we're the same, da, 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 or were you treated with a little bit more like, whoa, we're not the same, bro, kind of thing? What was that like?
So it's like, so so when I went to Jamaica, I went a little bit, I went from a perspective of like being more touristy. So, going to St. Lucia and and going in and not being so touristy, I'm going in and I was dating a young lady from St. Lucia at the time. And the first thing they told me to do when I got there is, we're going to try and do a lot of local stuff. So don't say anything. Right. And the idea around this was, if I don't say anything, then we can get local treatment. And local treatment, the idea was that we can get things cheaper, because people won't assume that you have like all this extra money. There were like all these perks to being local.
Mm.
And so, you know, I laugh about it now a little bit and laughed about it then, but it felt good in some degree because, you know, the whole, like these folks from St. Lucia were like willing to claim me. And then they were just telling me, just don't say anything and people won't know the difference. And
Yeah.
and that's exactly what I did the whole time I was there.
Mm.
Same thing in the Bahamas, right? When I would go to the Bahamas with my family, Mitch and Shanae, who I'm hoping will tune into some of these. They
Shout
you
out
know,
to
they would
Mitch.
take me in. Yeah, I know, man. They'd take me in, and then they would just tell me, like, whenever we go out, just don't say anything, just shut up, keep your mouth closed. And so there is something about like the way that I look that that allowed me the perks of being local and feeling welcome into community, which is something that really mattered because a part of my identity here in the United States is that I actually don't really belong. And that was part of what I was getting at, you know, earlier on in the conversation is there's a part of identity here, as you know, right, that is connected to so many different things. Do I speak right? Am I proper in the ways in which I engage? Have I fully assimilated into what is traditional white American culture? And that gets me far enough that people will say, well, at least you're not, quote unquote, one of those other ones, right? Which has been really hurtful and angering to me because I claim my people, you know, and I claim my racial identity. It's just when I was coming up, I had access to different things that caused me to show up in the world differently. And so I've always felt like I'm in the middle, that I'm not, you know, quite Black enough. Because racial identity is connected to language, it's connected to dress and culture, it's connected to, you know, hairstyle, it's connected to so many things, you know? And let me just say this one last part. So like, so like from there to then like walking into spaces where the people are like, you're not Black enough, and in other spaces where people are like, and you're certainly not white enough, right? You're not so Black that you can't be in the room with us, but you're actually not white, and you need to remember that. And so being like in places like the Bahamas and like St. Lucia and Jamaica, it was like everybody is Black, and if I just stay quiet, I can be accepted by them.
Wow.
Right.
That's a whole nother, it's like, it takes off the layer of you don't have to be white to be accepted, but it adds an extra layer of you have to still assimilate in a certain way to the culture that you're, you know, at hand, that in order to be accepted there, you have to still suppress part of yourself to be accepted, which is really quite fascinating.
Yeah.
But I think that what you're saying too also speaks to what both of the pieces this week spoke to as well. There were elements in both pieces where they said exactly that, where it's like, I am not Black enough to be this, and I'm not white enough to be that, or like, you know. And I thought that Alexis, when in her piece where she mentioned her friend, her Asian American friend, and who wasn't accepted by China, and who was tolerated by Jamaica.
Yeah, that was tough, man. Yeah,
that was, man. And then, but accepted by Blacks, you know, in America when she came over, and how challenging and how hurtful that was for her to experience something like that. It's like that constant fight for identity. Similarly with McKatie's piece, you know, when she said, when she had mentioned, you know, not being Black, when she basically learned about her identity, you know, when she met another light-skinned person like her.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up? Hey, I see you down there. Yes, I see you down there. Hello. But yeah, I just thought that was really, I think that what you're saying really speaks to a piece of what both of the monologues that we've seen this week have said. And I wanted to ask you, you know, what's your experience with your first experience. I think I'm stealing one of your questions.
Hey, that's a good question, brother. That's a good question.
Yeah. Oh, hey, we're doing good, man. Glad you could drop by. But my question is for you, William, what is your first experience with that, with identifying as, with finding out, your color and identifying.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Some like one of my earliest experiences that I can remember around identity had to do with when I first started school. So, so try to picture little 5-year-old William. I'm sure you can remember
I can remember this. Yeah.
So cute, innocent, like doesn't really understand the world. And I remember as I was going to school, I was the only Black kid in my class. And going to school, everybody had like that straight, like long hair. And I was growing up during a time when like the haircuts that you got, that like the white kids would get like those skater cuts, I'm talking about like the longer skater cuts and things like that.
Yes.
And I remember as a little kid that part of my struggle was like identifying and loving my hair. Y'all can see I've like kind of moved past that. But I used to want like long stringy hair. Not necessarily because I like hated my hair, but because I wanted to be so much like the other kid. So,
yeah, you still there.
One of the things that happened to me was I used to like fake and play like I had longer stringy like skater cut hair. And I started realizing that was one of my earliest memories of identity that I struggled to identify, particularly with my Black hair, and I had like the Phillies fade, the Will Smith. So like, so like I had the tight curls, and with the short sides and things like that. And I just didn't look like the other kids, and I just wanted to fit in. So like it was really a struggle for me, and something that I didn't know how to articulate to my parents. But that my parents, like I was articulating it in my way, which was like I was acting like my hair was straight, but they weren't able to identify that I was having identity issues because I didn't have people that looked like me. And so racial identity, this is why it's so important for representation in schools, for representation of students, and also representation of teachers. Like my identity was shaped by, most of my teachers were white. I had one Black female teacher in first grade. The rest of my teachers were white until I got to college, where my first Black male teacher was my third year of college.
Wow.
And so when you think about, like, imagine like how that shapes a person's identity. Like, it's just crazy to me,
Yeah. And it's well, my first experience with that actually didn't really come until college. My experiences happened slightly later in life. I remember my mom actually telling me different stories as a kid, like growing up, about a time that I embarrassed her, in a grocery store because, a white lady said something and something offhand to my mom, and my mom had said, "Oh man, she's a racist and da 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 da, and she's just prejudiced against us because we're Black." And I had apparently looked at my mom and I was like, "Who's Black? What's But this is also child, little baby Sean, like 5-year-old Sean as well, and I'm like, what? Who's Black? And my mom, my mom, she was mortified. She's like, what? You are Black. You are Black. And don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. And I was like, oh, okay. But I don't remember that moment. But I remember, growing up, going through high school, having predominantly white friends because, as an actor, there wasn't a whole lot of people who looked like me, you know, like you talk, going back to the representation part of it. Like I was one of the very few who looked like me and who had, you know, that kind of representation in my school as an actor. But they were all cool. Like nobody said anything offhanded. Nobody made like any like black jokes or anything like that. Like it just wasn't a thing. But in college, I was really, really, my eyes were really opened to who I was. Because I was in Nebraska, which no hating on Nebraska, but there are like very few black folks there, and there are very few minorities there in general. But that was a spot where I finally showed up, and I was like, "Whoa, where are all of the people?" You know, like that not only that look like me, but just the array of people of minorities and different races and cultures and stuff. Because growing up in Colorado, in Aurora, as you know, it's a melting pot, you know. But my first experience as you know, came with a girl that I was dating who, you know, whose grandparents didn't like the fact that she was dating me, despite, you know, how nice I was and all the nice things that they had to say about me. And they let her know that, you know, if she continued to date me, they warned her that, you know, she was going to have that her kids, you know, were going to have problems, and that she was encouraged to, you know, find somebody white who would be able to provide in ways, or, you know, all these mythical, you know, you know, notions of how a person can provide or whatever, you know, like, and that was something that had followed me through a lot of like my experiences in college. And it wasn't until, you know, I met Luciana, my wife, who broke that down and was like, you know, not today. But that was my first experience with it. And it really shook me. It shook me, and it shaped a lot of the ways that I looked at the world. I would say, like, I became a little bit more woke to, you know, to my identity as a black male, and had a little bit more empathy and compassion for, you know, people, my people as well, you know, like that. Okay, this is something that is real and that people actually talk about. I honestly did not think it was a thing. So that really, so that shaped my blackness a whole lot, like a whole lot. But actually, I want to get to a quick question here. So Colby asked a question. Do you feel as though the election in the States further pushes people, or further pushes different cultures apart as opposed to bringing them together? I'll ask that again. Do you feel that as though the election here in the States pushes people apart, or as opposed to bring them together? What do you think, man?
Yeah, and there's another question down here from Kobe as well, at the very bottom, just so you know. So
cool.
Yeah, so I think yes, I think the election is pulling people apart. But the thing that I want to say about this is that it's not just about like the election. So I think that right now, in at least in the United States, our relationship to each other has like become exposed. I think what's happened since Donald Trump was elected into office, right? We've all been kind of been in relationship with each other and like have not said certain things, like race and the conversation about race, racial identity, all that stuff has been faux pas for like, I would say, the past 20 years. We haven't really like talked about it for real. And then you have a president who I believe in a lot of ways has, at the very least, has not denounced supremacy and racism context and white supremacists as groups. hasn't denounced them at the very least. And I'm trying to say that, I'm trying to be like very, I know this isn't like a political space to like talk about different kind of politics and things like that. What I will say about that is that because that has happened, people who are like have come from different walks of life, like Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, progressive, you know, you name it, right? That like, for me, I have been incredibly disappointed with my white counterparts in terms of the ways in which they've showed up at this particular time. People who I've grown up with, who know me, who love me, who supposedly love me and have supposedly like wanted to be in relationship with me. I feel like that divisiveness, that divide happened like after the presidential election in 2016, but it's not because of elections. It's actually because it's been sitting here all along, and now there has been a moment where people feel emboldened to talk about it. Yeah, I think that's kind of what's been happening. But I would say that the elections do not help that. Kobe, thank you for your question.
Yeah, and she also asked, do you find that, and this is a really interesting question too, because yeah, I'll just read it out. Do you find that when you're around older folks that need to be, okay, do you find that you're around older folks that need to be retaught, so to speak, on what is right and wrong in the 21st century? And I'll just speak to that a little bit, and I will say yes, yes, and yes. Yes, Colby, 100%. I mean, like, it's very interesting, and I'm not hating on the the older generations or anything like that, because it's a different way of life. It's a different way of living, that from where we come from now. And I think that where we live, the world we live in now, has allowed us a little bit more freedom to speak, which is something that we can identify with in our age range more so than they can, identify with in a big sense. And especially from the upbringing that William and I both had, growing up in the Christian community, it was very much a, don't talk about it, pray about it kind of thing, and just kind of let things go or whatever, and just give it up. But there are a lot of folks that we've encountered. I know for me, I'm sure you have, William, too, in the work that you do. But like, there is some folks, in our families and old friends who I'm just like, that is just not the right way to see the world nowadays. You know what I mean? You always have to check yourself and be like, you can't say stuff like that anymore. So you can't, I get it. You're in the comfort of your home, but just think about how the things we say in the comfort of our home affect our interactions when we go out into the world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's good, man.
And so it's like, I really try to be, what I've learned from that, Kobe, is that if someone of the older generation has something to say and blames it on the comfort of their home, puts it in that context, and I try and make sure that when I step out of the comfort of my home, that I treat people the same way that I would treat them within the comfort of my home. You know what I mean? But William, you speak to that. What's your experience with that?
So, I mean, I just want to say, quick shout outs to Lojeta. Thanks for joining, sister. You'll get to meet Lojeta at some point in CZDs. Kobe, I don't know. I really appreciate your questions. You're like one of my new best friends now. I hope to meet you in person one day. Part of the way I relate to this, and the reason I'm smiling and laughing, is because exactly what Sean is saying, that like, the things that I hear come out of old people's mouths is like, I gotta like take like 3 like takes, like, did you just say what you just said? Like, it's like, no, you can't say that. You should have been saying that, 20 years ago, but you certainly can't be saying things like that now. Think about what you're saying or why you're saying it. And so it's like, I think that our older generation, and all of the facets of that, like all racial identities, cultural identities, all that kind of stuff, are the thing that is like holding on to the past so much, and are really like fueling this like a lot of this racism, and like passing it down to their children in different kinds of ways. In fact, even my own relationship to racism, I hope my parents won't kill me for this, but I'm gonna say that.
Mine either.
Right,
Mine either.
even my own relationship to racism and understanding of racism, it was taught to me through traumatic experiences that I would not have related race to. Some of them I would not have related race to until my parents connected it to that.
Mm.
So like there is, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, right? But there is a level of I just think that like, you know, speaking about our parents, and like speaking even about ourselves as we become like, you know, I'm a parent now, we're becoming parents now, and like we will be the older generation in 10 years. You know what I'm saying? 20 years. So I think that I just think that so much of how our identity and our ideology and our thinking, all of that is shaped first and foremost by the generation that comes before us. And so it's like, you know, a part of me is like, can we even do we take the time to try to teach that generation? Because like, I don't know if you all have the same experience with your with like the older generation and your elders and things like that, but they look at me like, who is this young whippersnapper trying to tell me anything? And my parents are like, I changed your diapers, dude.
Right.
Don't tell me what to do.
That's always the upper hand. That's always the upper hand is, I change your diapers, you don't talk back to me.
Exactly.
I'll whoop your behind. Something like that.
They would be mortified. My mother would be mortified right now if she was on Instagram.
That's so funny. But I think that's a really interesting question, though, because I mean, that's just a really interesting perspective that a lot of folks don't really think about. Tom asks, what do you think needs to be done educationally? So that's a great follow-up question, Tom, because, you know, going back to what you were saying, Will, about being the next generation, how we need to shape the identity of the next generation. Tom asks, you know, what do you think needs to be done educationally to help that next generation reclaim and own their identity?
Yeah. Tom. Dang, Tom. That's a good question.
No, look, Tom asks good questions too. Don't sleep on him.
I hella like y'all. Man, y'all just like put these things out here for real. I mean, I think I think in a lot of ways, a part of what needs to be done is for us to take our hands off of our young people. Like,
what do you mean by that? Let's break it down a little bit.
I'm like trying to let me put it together. I'm trying to put it together in my head, you know, formulate it. No, I think that I think when we I believe that like kids like are really, really clear about who they are. Watching my son Trace, you know, operate in the world, it's like the more I put hands on him, the more I put like parameters and identity on him, the more he bucks against me in the very beginning. It's like the more I allow him to be, it's like he definitely doesn't have he definitely has a racial lens. Like he understands the difference between a white person and a black person. But he does not recognize the difference connected to the negative connotation that we have to it. It's like his identity, he is both happy with his hair and also likes to touch other people's hair. It is and a part of this is because he's unaware of the context of racism that exists in our world, and that we are like trying to create both a reality for him and like try to like shield him from the pain of racism, and like racial identity and things like that until it comes later.
Mm-hmm.
I just believe I just believe that and look at the notes trace well. This, like, I believe that kids are naturally want to go towards loving each other and being in community, hugging each other, holding each other's hands, and they actually don't care about what you look like as long as you seem safe.
Mm.
And so, like, yeah, Alexis, like, I think that it is about, like, we have to put less parameters on our kids and on their thinking, and like let them just be, and they'll get us free. They'll get us free from all of this if we let them. I mean, I don't want to be so naive as to think that like that people aren't out here like teaching their kids to be racist, because like that is true, and that people aren't out here so naive about the world that like they teach kids to hate their skin or hate their hair, or hate the way that they like show up in the world and the and different kinds of ways unintentionally. So the last thing I'll say about this, Tom, is that, like, from my perspective, I would say that we need to do less training of the education of the next generation, and more training of the education and education of the generation that is teaching that generation. And that education is about us like getting really clear to take our grubby hands off of our beautiful children, right?
Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, it's just funny the way you said that, but that's 100% true, man. That's 100% true. And as Kobe just pointed out too, people are not born racist. It is definitely a trait that is picked up. Racism is not innate. It is not something that is within us when we come out into this world. But yeah, I just think that, yeah, we do. You're right. We need to get our hands off and take a step back and let people love one another for who they are. Yeah. Regardless of any sort of like regardless of our personal influence on these kids and stuff like that, and it's on other people.
Yeah.
It's really hard though. It's hard not to get caught up in that though. Not that because I don't have kids or anything like that, but like you could see how people can get caught up in saying things offhand, that have shaped their experiences, that you're like, oh, like, I mean, now my brother-in-law is going to kill me for this if he is. But he's not on Instagram, so boo. But I just think it's really funny because he's had some crazy experiences in life, that around his blackness. And I see that he struggles with his identity a lot. In ways that have now affected his kids, you know what I mean? In the sense that, things that he'll say offhand, like, oh, well, blah, 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 or, well, this, that, and the other. And he's saying it not just out of insecurity for where he's coming from, but as from a place of instruction, like, kids, now take note of what your dad is saying, da, 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 da. And it's like, I look at it with both. I look at it mostly with sadness because I know that it's not coming from that it is coming from a place of hurt. That his identity has been hurt in such a way that he feels like he has to warn. You know what I mean? And that's what we've been caught up in even right now, where over these past 5 years of police brutality and all that, we have now been trading our younger generation and our fellow brothers and sisters to we've been warning them to say, look, this is who you are, this is your identity, this is what you need to do in order to show up right around cops or around white folks in your professional environments, and da 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 da. And it's just it's hard, is it not, to get caught up in wanting to instruct people. You know what I mean? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah, I mean, it's like, Yeah, bruh. Man. I think that it's like this fine line because and I don't know how it is in Britain and like in other parts of like in other areas where Black people aren't like the majority population. Like here it's like not teaching our kids about that stuff is also the difference between life and death. So it's like there is this like struggle around like how do I talk to Trace, my son, about these kinds of issues without taking away his like innocence and his ability to be able to operate in the world as a whole being, that recognizing that like his racial identity is one part of his identity, and that he needs to know that that racial identity in the world, like it can be dangerous, and at the same time like allow him to walk around in the world in his fullest self, and build the world that we actually all want to live in. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel you around like it's like sometimes we can pass on our pain onto our kids,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and like trying to figure out the difference between passing on our pain and also passing on like our experiences and our knowledge in a way that allows our kids to be able to show up and be safe.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's exactly what I'm getting at is how do we steer away from passing on pain, but but passing on positive thing. But anyway, I want to bring up Alexis's question real quick too. How do we feel about people identifying as Black that don't have parents or grandparents that are Black?
Oh, that's interesting too.
Maybe we could ask her to unpack that a little bit, but I mean, what do you think about it?
Yeah.
How do we feel as people identifying as Black that don't have parents or okay, all right. So I think I see what she's asking here. It's kind of speaking to like a white kid who grew up, in Black culture. You know what I'm saying? And they may act or talk a certain way that lends itself for people to say, "Oh, why are you acting Black?" or whatever like that, which is an ignorant statement in itself. Because you can't act Black. Black is not a thing to be acted on. But I think that's what she's talking to. If and correct me, Alexis, if I'm mistaken. But how do we feel about that? I will say, I'll put it in from my perspective. I might be putting myself out on a limb here, but a lot of folks would say that I talk white because of where I grew up and how I look and how I whatever, right? I don't identify as white, but society would place that on me and say, well, you're not Black, and because you talk this way and act this way, but I don't have white. I mean, there's white folks in my family, but they're pretty far removed. But I would say that, like, from that perspective, I would want someone to feel the same way about me, and accept me for who I am. Oh gosh, I'm not choosing my way. Oh, William, you're so much more eloquent. But I'll rewind. It's if I see a white kid and he grew up in Black culture, if I see a white kid who I know and I've grown up with, and he has been around my family and all that kind of stuff, I'm not going to see him as equally Black. I'm going to see him as that person. But if they're, regardless of how they talk or act or whatever, if their experiences and where they grew up lend them to talking and acting a certain way, then I'm not going to just impose on them that they're acting that way. I'm going to attribute that to they are who they are based on how they grew up.
Yeah.
But that's just, if I'm unpacking that right, Alexis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that's what you're saying with what you're asking with people identifying as Black that don't have Black, parents or grandparents. What do you think about that, William?
I mean, my question is always like why? So, if like why is a person trying to identify as Black? And she's saying what? It's complicated. It's a complicated one. There are people that feel more Black than Black people based on their cultural absorption. And then there are also several. Yes, good old.
Yeah, okay. I thought that's what you were bringing up too, the Rachel Dolazols.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it's like this. If you have the privilege of being able to say that you're Black sometimes and that you're white sometimes, right? There is there's something that needs to be unpacked. It's like when I say for me, Blackness, and in the context, and again, I want to speak from the American context and the United States context and how we move in the United States and how I'm also received in my identity in other places. It's like I'm both proud to be Black and aware that my Blackness can get me hurt or killed in different contexts. And so, from that perspective, I have a big problem with people that are engaging in calling themselves Black because it's a cool thing or a fad, right? That the consequences of them saying that, like the risk for them isn't the same as my risk. But it's different than so for example, Sean and I, we both come from the same family, and our lineage is like Sean's people get lighter on his dad's side, and could pass for white. My Uncle Will could pass for white and could have passed for white if he wanted to, but made the conscious decision to continue to identify with his Black family. And we have family members that we're just starting to find that identify as white because they were able to do so in our context, and that was about safety. And so again, identity, it's so complicated because in a lot of ways all of our lineage and our DNA comes through some kind of Black lens at some point in time. And so people being able to claim their 1% or their 0.00001% of Blackness in our country, in our context, makes sense, because if you have one drop in some states in our history, that meant that you were Black. And I think that people need to be careful about taking this identity because it's cool and using it because it's cool and because they like it. It's not just because you like an identity and you like the culture that comes along with that identity doesn't mean that you need to adopt the whole thing altogether. So I'm really trying to be careful, because I don't want to also tell people what to do and how to be, but just recognizing that when you're operating from that perspective, making sure that you have a full and clear lens around race, and how it's relating to how it relates to people in this actual world, and the danger or lack of danger that you're putting yourself in.
Yeah. I think I can smell my pineapple pizza cooking.
Yeah, brother. We want to take one from Kobe and then move.
Yeah. Let's take the last question from Colby here, because she's got she's hitting them out the park. Everybody, I just want to say, everybody, you guys, thank you so much for all the questions that you guys are putting in here too. Alexis, Colby, Tom, and everybody who's shown up today. Thank you guys for your contribution to this talk back. We love, everybody's input, and we love, the different perspectives that people bring. And as an actor, and as fellow artists that are on this thing, our whole job is to tell stories, and listening to each other's stories is what I think makes this world a beautiful place. So I'll get off that little soapbox and I'll just say, let's go to Kobe's question. Do you feel as though the Black Lives Matter movement is the correct platform to continue to teach the younger generation upon? Or do you feel as though the Black Lives Matter movement is derived from anger and should be adapted? Ooh, ah.
You try to get me in trouble with my people.
And Tom is throwing me under the bus with my pineapple pizza. All right, speak to it, William. Speak to it.
So let me put it this way. When we talk about BLM, I have to just separate BLM as an organization, which has a platform, from the BLM movement, which is a movement of people coming across like a whole country and the whole world, and coming from different perspectives and different organizations and different organizing collaboratives, right? So the BLM movement, I think, is one of the most important things that Black people have in this particular moment, and that is the ideology that people should admit that Black lives matter, and that the reason that people need to admit that is because it has become abundantly clear in our context, really across the world, right? And so I think that is a very important thing, and that the ways in which children should be taught and should be brought up around that should be based around their context and where they are. So I can't speak for every place and how they're relating to it. I do believe that the Black Lives Matter organization, right, has its own ideologies, and I believe in some of that platform and not in other parts of that platform. And that actually is okay, because I believe in the movement. That doesn't mean that I have to believe in all of the platform that comes from the organization that is a part of a larger movement that is Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, the at the core of it, it is what you said earlier. It is the recognition that Black Lives Matter. It is the recognition that Black Lives Matter. Period. And anybody who would say otherwise has some digging to do within themselves.
Right. And so I think that there are things that the Black Lives Matter movement, that the Black Lives Matter organizational platform and ideology would really help to develop our children. And I think that it is too, the conversation about that platform and how people experience that platform and how people are carrying out the tactics people are using to push that agenda or that platform is something that is up for debate. People have to, not all of the tactics that are being used I would teach Trace to use in his organizing, nor are all the tactics and all the ways and the ideologies that are being pushed out there are all the things that I believe. And that, go ahead, Chief.
No, I was going to say which are what, but we don't have to get into that.
Yeah. I mean, we got 3 more weeks, right?
We got 2 more. Yeah, there's a lot of unpacking that we're going to do, and there's a lot of unpacking that we're going to do on a lot of different things. And I'm sure that that identity is going to come back up in the next conversations as well. What did you have anything that you wanted to finish up with, or? No,
it was a pleasure to do this, man. Sean, I'm so honored that you would ask me to do this with you, and I just really appreciated the conversation. Kobe, Lojeta, Alexis, Tom, and anybody else that joined in this conversation. I just really want to appreciate you and appreciate the ways in which you